It's going to be called switch. We are on page 5-14. And we got to do our very first loft or blend. It's going to be switch, and for the description I would still say switch, comma, button style, or switch, comma, flashlight, whatever floats your boat. Needless to say, this is the switch for the flashlight assembly that we've been building part by part, part by part by part. It's like watching paint dry. Any day now. Let's see if I close this, if that helps. Yay, progress. Kind of. Ta-da! Okay. And we're going to call it switch, comma, flashlight. Okay, now we're creating a loft, so the first thing we remember about a loft is it requires more than one work plane. Do you remember that? So we're going to select this top work plane here, and we're going to create two offset planes from that top work plane. And where's my zip? Cannot find it. So we're creating 2 offset work planes from that top plane. So I'm going to select that top plane, and then under reference geometry, I'm going to select that plane, the plane tool. So I'm highlighting top plane before I select the plane tool, so it knows which plane I want to offset. We're not doing a sketch yet. First we're creating our planes. Okay, we want to create 2 planes, so we can do it, we can create them more than one at a time. So I can just say I want to do 2, and I want them to be 1/2 inch apart. So I give it the 1/2 inch, we're going to create 2, and we're offsetting from that top plane. And then you're going to say green check. And you'll see, I'm going to turn on the visibility of my top plane. You should have a total of 3 planes 1/2 inch apart. If there anybody lost, raise your hand. Okay, now, question?
Yeah, why won't it let you do the offset planes if you started a sketch first?
Because you're creating reference geometry. You can't create reference geometry when you're in the middle of a sketch. You have to be out of a sketch in order to place reference geometry. Paul in the background needs help. Okay, so when you're creating a loft, you imagine the part, and imagine you're taking a knife and you're kind of slicing it at different intervals, and whatever the profile would be at that interval, that's what the sketch is going to be like. So in this case, we're imagining that we're slicing the part at 1/2 inch intervals. So if we were going to loft, for example, a watermelon or a football, right, we would pretend we were slicing it, and those very thin slices would be the profile. Okay, so a lot of times what I do to keep track of what's going on is I'll rename my planes. So in this case, my top plane is actually at the bottom now, so I'm going to type in bottom so I can kind of keep track. And this plane 1 is in the middle, so I'm going to just say that it's the middle. And then this plane 2 is in the top of what's what. I've done lofts where I've had as many as 10 work planes, so it's kind of a nice habit to get into, that you're naming your planes. So we're going to start out with this first plane at the bottom and create our first sketch. And our first sketch is going to be a center rectangle with the center, of course, coincident to the origin. And it's basically going to be a square. So I'm going to add a relationship so the 2 sides are equal. And then the dimension is going to be 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to exit my sketch. Okay, and I'm going to call that sketch my bottom sketch, so I can keep track of which sketch goes to what. Now, loft is one of the few features where you want to be out of sketch mode, regardless of, so you can select all your sketches. Does anybody get lost and needing help? So that bottom plane, first plane. Okay, and it's just a square. Now the second sketch is going to go on the middle plane. So once again, it's helpful to have that plane named, and we're going to start sketch, and this one's going to be a circle. And what we want is we want this circle to be tangent to the rectangle we just placed. So I can so I can say I want this arc and this line, and I want it to be tangent, and I want that arc and that line and set it to be tangent, and that will fully define it. Notice all I did was add two tangent constraints, one to this side and one to this side, and that basically had it figure it out. And then I'm going to exit the sketch, and I'm going to rename this sketch Sketch Middle. Okay, anybody lost, needing help? Wow, you guys are awesome. Okay, the last sketch is the most complicated, okay, because the instructions in the book are not so easy to understand. So I want you to watch me so you can kind of understand what she's saying. It's going to go on that last work plane, so we're going to select New Sketch. We're going to create a circle, but we want the circle to have a relationship between the size of the rectangle and the size of the circle. So what she does is she draws a line from the center point to the end, a center line, and then she places a point right at that midpoint right there. Then she draws a circle with the center at the center point and the radius at that midpoint. And notice that fully defines it.
How did you add that point?
I just selected the point tool right here, and when I put it on the line, it'll wake up to the midpoint. Okay? Now, what makes this a cool question, Harvey?
Was that a line or a center line?
That's a center line, because it's a construction line. I don't want it to be part of the geometry. I'm going to exit out. I want to show you why she would do that. So it kind of goes to design intent. What she did was she created a relationship between all three sketches. The only sketch with a dimension is this bottom sketch, right? The middle sketch is tangent to both sides, and the third sketch, the second circle, is guaranteed to be half the size of the first circle, right? So if I come over to this bottom sketch and I change this value to say 1 inch, and then do a rebuild, see how all the sketches update? Because you've created that relationship linking. So that's why she did it that way. So I'm going to switch it back to 0.5. I just want you to understand why she did it, because a lot of times people say, well, that just seems like, why didn't she just add dimensions? Why do you know, but see that by doing it this way, you only have to change one dimension instead of having to go through and open every single sketch, right? So she guarantees that they're going to all interact together, regardless of what happens. So any questions about where we're at so far? Okay, so at this point, we've got 3 active planes and 3 active sketches. So I'm going to turn off the visibility of the planes because I don't really need to see them anymore. Here are my sketches. I'm ready to create my loft. Now I'm going to create the loft without guide curves, and then I'm going to create it with guide curves. She doesn't show you how to do guide curves in the book, but guide curves are really, really helpful and useful, and I'm going to explain that in a second. So we're going to select the loft. So we select the loft off the ribbon, and the order you select the sketches is basically the order it's going to build the part. So notice you have an up-down arrows here. So you can reorder your sketches if you need to. So I'm going to select my first sketch. I'm going to kind of show you. So there's the sketch bottom. If I click the sketch top. Okay, and it shows you, and then I click that sketch middle. See, it kind of is going, I don't know what to do with that, because it's having to go inside itself. So I can put the sketch middle in the middle, and then you see what it does. Notice it's got these little green bubbles on it. Those are called kind of like connectors. These kind of act like guide curves. You can move these to kind of control what your sketch is looking. Now, if you right click, you can show all connectors. And see, it shows you of all the bubbles that are kind of controlling your part. And that basically allows you to control the twist. And see, as I make adjustments, see how the shape changes? So it basically allows me to control the twist. See that? And as I adjust it, the twist gets adjusted. I'm going to move that one over here, that one over there, that one over here. So you see how the shape changes as I move things around, and then I just green check. Okay, so my shape's going to look a little bit different from your shape depending on what you did with your connectors. Okay, now what if I wanted to have even more control over the shape? Now we're going to talk about guide curves. So I'm going to delete my loft and go back to my sketches. Now, here, remember I talked about guide curves and lofts before, about a week ago. Rule for guide curves is one curve per sketch, and each curve should be coincident to all the sketches. So I'm going to click on the bottom sketch, and I'm going to add some points that I can use for my guide curves. So I'm going to add a point here, point here, point here, point here. So I basically placed a point in the middle of each line. Okay, I'm going to be using those points for my guide curve. And then I'm going to come to that circle and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add a point at each quadrant. I'm going to switch to an isometric view so you can see. So you can see I've added points at each quadrant here and points at each quadrant on the rectangle. I'm going to do it on the third sketch. And I'm just going to add a point at each quadrant. So you can see that there are points there. So now I can add my guide curves. And I'm going to put two guide curves on my front plane, two guide curves on my right side plane. So I'm going to go to my front plane. And I'm going to just draw, I can use a spline or I can use an arc. I'm just going to use a 3-point arc. Notice I set my arc so that it's coincident to those 3 points. Do you see that? So I've got the two endpoints coincident and that midpoint coincident to that point. Okay? And then I'm going to exit the sketch. Now a lot of students, the biggest mistake they make is they try to mirror it over or copy it over or they draw it. The rule is one guide curve per sketch. That counts as one guide curve. So I'm going to rename this guide curve 1. Okay, now I'm going to go to the front plane, create it, come over, I'm going to do another arc. That's guide curve 2. Okay, then when I go to the right plane, I can do a spline, so I can say, okay, I'm going to start here, come here, come here. Notice I can kind of adjust it a little bit. See that? Make the shape a little bit more interesting. All right? And let me add
What was the first time that you were
the front plane. Okay. Let's trim. I'm going to trim it. Trim. Power trim. Oops. Control C. All right. So there's my third guide curve. And then I'm going to the right plane to make my last guide curve. And once again, if I want to make a spline, so you can kind of see what it looks like. I'm going to adjust one of my splines to be a little more interesting. Let me add insert point. Put a point there. Okay, so I just kind of adjusted my spline so I had a little bump there so you can kind of see how the guide curve's going to change. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm just going to insert a point and then just kind of bump it out so you can kind of see. Okay, so there I've got 4 guide curves, 3 sketches, gonna go to the loft. Once again, I select each sketch in turn. Now here's my guide curves. Okay? Now watch what happens as I select the guide curves. There's guide curve 1. And see how the shape adjusted? There's guide curve 2. There's guide curve 3. And notice I can select it off of the tree. I don't have to select it in the browser. I don't have to select it in the window. I could do it either way. And see how it adjusted, see how it bumped it? And then I'm gonna green check. See that? See how the shape changed a little bit? So I'm gonna save it. And then the last thing I'm gonna do is just add a little dome. So I'm going to select this top face, select the dome tool, so you can see the loft gives you the ability to create more organic type shapes, more sculptural type shapes. The dome's going to be 0.5. Oh no, wait a minute. 0.2. Sorry. I want it to be 0.2. That doesn't look very good. 0.2. That does not look very good. Okay. I want to uncheck the continuous dome, and then it'll look better. So I don't want to have it, I want to make sure I uncheck continuous dome and then set it to 0.2, green check. There's my switch. Now everybody's switches is going to be a little bit different depending on how you adjusted your connectors or your guide curves. When you create the drawing for your switch, you're going to use that refer to CAD model note, because trying to dimension your loft is going to be kind of tricky. So all I really want is for you to give me the base and the overall height, and then a refer to CAD model note. And that's it for the switch. Any questions? Awesome. You are in lab.